Okay, so you're here because, let's be honest, you want to get right to the heart of things. You don't want to wade through, endless articles and reports, right?
Right, exactly.
So that's what we're doing here. We're taking a deep dive, and today it's into this whole world of AI, artificial intelligence, but
Mhm.
specifically some of the recent breakthroughs that are really starting to change the game.
Yeah, and I think what's so fascinating is we're not just talking about, potential or hype anymore. We're seeing AI actually master some incredibly difficult tasks. Things that, even a few years ago people thought were way off in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And not just mastering them, but like doing them in ways that we humans never even, thought of doing them.
Exactly. Like it's not just about speed or processing power. It's like AI is approaching these problems from a completely different angle
Yeah.
and coming up with solutions that are, mind-blowing.
Okay, so let's jump right into it. And the first story that I want to talk about is one that really blew my mind when I first came across it, and it's the story of AlphaZero.
Oh, yeah, AlphaZero, that's a classic.
It is. And, back in 2017, late 2017, this AI developed by Google DeepMind, I mean, it just did something remarkable. It went up against Stockfish, which at the time was considered like the top, chess program in the world, the gold standard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Everybody thought Stockfish was unbeatable. It had been crushing human grandmasters for years.
And AlphaZero not only beat it, it completely dominated it. I mean, the initial matches were just staggering. AlphaZero won 28 games, there were 72 draws, and get this, not a single loss, zero.
Yeah, that's the part that really gets you, right? Like not even one loss. I mean, it's just a clean sweep.
And as if that wasn't enough, right, they decided to do an even bigger rematch, like a 1,000-game rematch. And in that rematch, AlphaZero just continued to show its, dominance. It won 155 of those games, lost only 6, and drew the rest.
That's an incredible level of consistency, right? I mean,
I
to
know.
perform at that level against the very best in the world for that many games, it's just unheard of.
And here's the thing that I think is so mind-blowing about AlphaZero. It wasn't like these other chess programs, that were kind of pre-programmed with all of this, human chess knowledge, centuries of strategy and openings and
They
tactics.
were essentially trying to mimic human expertise and,
Yeah,
encode that into the program.
exactly. But AlphaZero was different. It basically learned the game from scratch, like literally from nothing. It just played against itself millions and millions of times.
Yeah, just given the basic rules of chess and the objective to win, right, maximize its chances of winning.
And from that, it taught itself to become the best in the world. I mean, think about that.
It's wild, right? And what's even more amazing is that through this process of self-learning, AlphaZero actually started to develop its own unique style of play, its own tactics,
Yeah.
strategies that had never been seen before.
Yeah, I remember reading about how it would sometimes sacrifice these incredibly powerful pieces like the queen, and it would just seem crazy to human observers, like, why would you ever do that, But then, steps later, it would become clear that it was all part of this, much deeper strategy.
Right? Like it was thinking many moves ahead in a
Yeah.
way that humans just couldn't grasp. And it wasn't afraid to make these unconventional moves that, went against all of this established human wisdom.
There's this great quote from Gary Kasparov, who, is a legend in the chess world. He said, chess has been shaken to its roots by AlphaZero. And I think that really sums it up. It was like this moment where we realized that AI could not only, play chess as well as humans, but actually play it in a way that was fundamentally different and potentially better.
Yeah, it really challenged our assumptions about, what it means to be an expert in a field. Like
Mhm.
we thought that human intuition and, years of experience were the key, but AlphaZero showed us that there might be other ways to achieve mastery,
Yeah.
ways that we haven't even thought of.
So we've seen how AI can conquer this incredibly complex game of chess, right? But what about a challenge that's even more complex and even less defined, like the world of scientific discovery?
Right? Because chess, for all its complexity, still operates within a fixed set of rules. The real world is much messier. There's so much more uncertainty.
Exactly. And one area where AI is starting to make some really exciting progress is in drug discovery.
Mm.
The process of finding new medicines and treatments.
Yeah, and anyone who knows anything about drug discovery knows that it's traditionally a very long and very expensive process. It often takes years, if not decades, and billions of dollars to develop a new drug.
And a lot of it is just trial and error. Researchers have to test thousands, sometimes even millions of different compounds to see if they have the desired effect.
Right, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack, and it can be really frustrating because there's no guarantee that you'll ever find that needle.
But what if AI could help us find that needle, much faster and more efficiently? And that's exactly what happened with the discovery of a new antibiotic called Halicin.
Hallicin, oh yeah, I've heard of this. It was a pretty big deal.
It was a huge deal, and it was discovered by researchers at MIT in early 2020. And what's so remarkable about it is that it was discovered using AI.
So how did they do that? Do they, like, program the AI with all the knowledge of, chemistry and biology and drug interactions?
Well, it's kind of like what we were talking about with AlphaZero. They didn't try to pre-program the AI with all of this human knowledge. Instead, they created what's called a training set, which was basically a collection of data about different molecules.
Okay, so like a database of molecules and their properties.
Exactly. And this training set contained information about, the atomic structure of each molecule, the types of bonds that it had, and most importantly, whether or not it was effective at inhibiting the growth of bacteria.
So they were essentially showing the AI lots and lots of examples of molecules that worked as antibiotics and molecules that didn't, and letting it learn the patterns.
Right. And what's really interesting is that the AI didn't just memorize this data, it actually started to develop its own understanding of what makes a molecule an effective antibiotic. It was able to identify features and characteristics that weren't explicitly programmed into it.
So it's like the AI was actually learning some of the underlying principles of chemistry and biology.
Yeah, it was almost like it was developing a kind of intuition, like a human scientist would.
That's a fascinating way to think about it.
So once the AI had been trained on this data set, they gave it a much bigger challenge. They gave it a library of over 61,000 different molecules.
Wow, 61,000. That's a lot.
It's a huge number, and this library included existing FDA-approved drugs and natural compounds, things that had never been considered as potential antibiotics.
So they were basically saying to the AI, okay, you've learned what makes an antibiotic. Go find us some new ones.
And they gave it three main criteria. First, it had to predict whether or not a molecule would be an effective antibiotic. Second, it had to be structurally different from existing antibiotics.
Right, because we want to avoid the problem of antibiotic resistance,
Yeah,
where bacteria become resistant to the drugs that we have.
exactly. And third, the AI had to predict that the molecule would be non-toxic to humans.
This had to be safe to use.
Right. And incredibly, out of those 61,000 molecules, the AI identified one that met all three criteria, and they named it Halicin.
So a brand new antibiotic discovered entirely by AI.
It really is a remarkable story, and the researchers estimated that if they had tried to discover Halicin using traditional methods, it would have been prohibitively expensive. It would have taken years and years of research and millions of dollars.
It really highlights the potential of AI to accelerate scientific discovery,
Right.
right? It's like having a superpowered research assistant that can analyze vast amounts of data and identify promising leads that we humans might never have found on our own.
Yeah, and when you consider that drug discovery is just one area of science, imagine the possibilities in other fields like materials science or energy research or even, space exploration.
The potential is really limitless, and it's exciting to think about all the breakthroughs that might be just around the corner, thanks to AI.
So we've talked about AI mastering chess, we've talked about AI discovering new drugs, but there's another area of AI development that I think is equally fascinating and potentially even more transformative, and that's the world of language models like GPT-3.
GPT-3. Oh, yeah, that's the one that can write like a human, right? It can generate all kinds of text.
It's amazing what it can do. I mean, you can give it a prompt like a sentence or a paragraph,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it can generate entire stories, poems, articles, even code.
I've seen some of the stuff that it's produced,
Mhm.
and it's really uncanny how human-like it is. I mean, sometimes it's hard to believe that it wasn't written by a person.
I know it's really blurring the lines, and what makes GPT-3 so interesting in the context of what we've been talking about is that it's different from AlphaZero and the AI that discovered Halicin. Those AIs were designed for a very specific task.
Right. AlphaZero was all about chess, and the Halcyon AI was all about finding antibiotics.
Exactly, but GPT-3 is what's called a generative model, which means that it's not limited to a single task. It can generate all sorts of different types of text.
So it's more like a general-purpose AI for language.
And that makes it incredibly versatile. You can use it for things like writing marketing copy or translating languages or even generating personalized educational content.
It's like having a superpowered writing assistant that can adapt to all sorts of different needs.
And one of the things that I find most intriguing about GPT-3 is that it seems to have a kind of understanding of language. It's
Mhm.
not just stringing words together randomly. It's actually able to grasp concepts and ideas and express them in a way that's often quite sophisticated.
Yeah, there are examples of GPT-3 writing poems that are actually quite moving or coming up with creative metaphors or even engaging in philosophical debates.
I know it's really pushing the boundaries of what we thought AI could do with language, and it's raising all sorts of interesting questions about the nature of intelligence and creativity. Can a machine truly be creative, or is it just mimicking human creativity?
That's a deep question, and I don't think we have a definitive answer yet, but I think it's worth exploring, as AI continues to evolve.
Absolutely. So when we look at these three examples, AlphaZero, Halacin, GPT-3, what are some of the big takeaways for you? I mean, what does this tell us about the state of AI today and where it might be headed?
Well, I think one of the key takeaways is that AI is becoming increasingly capable of tackling really complex challenges,
Yeah.
challenges that were once thought to be the exclusive domain of humans.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing AI make significant contributions in fields like science, medicine, engineering, even art and literature.
And what's really interesting is that AI is often doing this by approaching these problems in ways that are fundamentally different from how humans would approach them.
Right. It's not just about processing information faster or more efficiently. It's about seeing the world through a different lens, using algorithms and statistical models to identify patterns and connections that we humans might miss.
Exactly. And this leads to another important takeaway, which is that AI is not simply a tool, it's a partner.
Hmm.
It's something that we can collaborate with to achieve greater insights and solve problems that we couldn't solve on our own.
I love that idea of AI as a partner. It's not about replacing human intelligence, but about augmenting it, about working together to create something new and innovative.
And I think that's a really powerful concept because it suggests that AI can help us to overcome some of our own limitations. Our biases, our limited perspectives, our tendency to get stuck in old ways of thinking.
It's like having a fresh set of eyes on a problem, someone who can come at it from a completely different angle and challenge our assumptions.
And that can be incredibly valuable,
Yeah.
especially in fields where progress has been slow or where we've hit a roadblock.
Mm.
AI might be able to help us to break through those barriers and make new discoveries.
So it sounds like you're pretty optimistic about the future of AI.
I am. I really am. I think we're at the beginning of a new era, an era where AI is going to play an increasingly important role in shaping our world. And I believe that if we approach it thoughtfully and responsibly, it has the potential to do a lot of good.
I agree. I think the key is to be mindful of the potential risks as well as the benefits, to make sure that AI is used for good and not for harm.
Absolutely. We need to be having conversations about ethics and values and making sure that AI is aligned with our goals as a society.
So for our listeners who are interested in learning more about AI, where should they start? What are some good resources?
Well, there are a ton of great resources out there, but I think one of the best places to start is with some of the organizations that are at the forefront of AI research and development. Places like Google AI, DeepMind OpenAI, they all have websites and blogs and podcasts where you can get up to speed on the latest advancements.
And there are also some great books and articles out there, that explore the philosophical and societal implications of AI.
Yeah, if you want to go a little deeper,
Yeah.
and really think about the big picture, there's a lot of great material out there.
So for our listeners who are thinking about, how AI might impact their own work or their own lives, what advice would you give them?
I would say embrace it. Don't be afraid of it. AI is a powerful tool, and it's only going to become more powerful in the years to come. So the sooner you start learning about it
Yeah.
and thinking about how you can use it, the better prepared you'll be for the future.
I think that's great advice. Be curious, be open-minded, and be ready to adapt.
Exactly, because the future is coming,
Uh-huh.
whether we're ready for it or not. And I think AI is going to be a big part of it.
So to wrap things up, we've talked about how AI is mastering complex tasks like chess making, groundbreaking discoveries in fields like medicine, and pushing the boundaries of language and creativity.
And we've explored some of the big implications of these advancements for society and for our own lives.
And we've encouraged our listeners to embrace AI, to learn about it, to think about how they can use it, and to be part of the conversation about how we shape the future of this transformative technology.
That's a great summary, and I think it leaves our listeners with a lot to think about.
It does indeed. So as always, thanks for taking this deep dive with us, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.